Recently, I was reading an article and I saw that this YouTube creator, Destiny, pays almost half of his income to
Hello, I like money.
his editor. So let's read it. So streamer Destiny has revealed how much he pays his YouTube editor after being asked the question live on stream. Destiny, a popular streamer in the political entertainment sphere, has recently opened up of how much money he makes from each of his YouTube channels. While discussing the numbers, he revealed he pays his editor August 45% of everything he earns.
Are you serious?
What had started as an agreement before he climbed to fame now results in a monthly paycheck over $30,000 to his editor. He is now opened up and revealed he thinks his employees deserve to grow with him. So this would be, for me, should be kind of like I wouldn't say a goal state in a sense being exactly like Destiny, but this is a goal state for me. The whole thing right now is that some people are pissed off about this. I know that. They're angry with that fact because the thing is that, one, people are usually mad because if that's happening to them, why can't they find somebody like that, right? So you have those people on that end that are just pissed off because it's not happening to them. But then you have people on the other end that's pissed off because they feel like they need to tell everybody what to do with their finances. It's a whole different shebang. My case is with this is that, one, I just think you have to be wise with it. I'm not sure. That's like a part owner of the, like 45% of your shares. That's not even part owner. That in any business, I think that's giving up majority control, right? If I recall correctly. So that's pretty huge. Basically, his editor can say and do whatever essentially Destiny gets to do, right? They probably don't have like a little bit of a harmonious relationship. So I wouldn't say that if Destiny decides to talk about something that his editor may disagree with or may not want him to speak about, I don't think that there was going to be a problem with Destiny still talking about that stuff, but there could be a problem with Destiny eventually being able to like not have his content edited, because you can kind of withhold that as a person, right? And having 45% shares is pretty huge, in my opinion. I do think people need to be compensated for their value. And that's what people don't understand in today's day and age, is that you're not compensated when you're working somewhere. You're not compensated for the value that you bring. You're compensated for whether the job is. So if the job is being, let's say, a barista, you're not compensated for the value of who you are. You're compensated on for what the job does. And this is what the company would pay for you to be a part-time, full-time barista, for example. We can even go like the burgers, right? A burger flipper. We can do that. We can go to a real estate agent, right? If you're in a real estate, that's a little bit different because you kind of do, it's all about commissions based, but then the company already has, or your real estate practice already has a percentage that you're getting from sales. And so that's what they think is adequate to be able to compensate you well and financially, right? So there's all these different facets, whether you're getting the hard, hey, this is your hourly rate, whether you're being able to create your own, for to say, like salary or pay, you're still being given those limits of what, you know, is available, what's not available for the company's best interest. And some people really do have an issue with it because they're sitting here like, yo, this company is whatever, and I'm not making as much. But there's a reality of what business is. And if you ever own a business and are paying your employees, it's kind of crazy. So if you owned your own coffee shop and you're paying your every single barista, let's say $50,000 just to do their job as a barista, nothing else. They're not running the floors. They're not in any type of management role. Then you have to think about, what are you going to be paying your management roles, right? What are you going to be taking just the next tier up, just being able to have a leader that runs the floor. And then you have either an assistant manager or just a store manager. Then you have the regionals and the DM and the regional directors, right? Then you keep going up the ladder, and then you keep asking yourself, what are you going to be paying these people for, right? And then you're getting yourself, pretty much digging yourself in a hole when it comes to expenses. And so this has been pretty prominent too, because like it's kind of timely right now. There's, in Call of Duty, there is roster mania, and a lot of people are going after the organizations and the CDL, the franchises, and saying that they're being paid, like players are being paid inadequately. I was able to talk to somebody earlier this week that's in the scene that disclosed, like, These guys are making almost the national minimum for a single person in a month, and that's the wage. And so what people don't understand too, if we look at the national minimum, what's the national? So it's roughly about $36,000 a year, which makes sense. And that's for a single person. But if you're a couple and living underneath the same household, I think the minimum is anywhere between 60 to 50,000. There's not much of a change there. You'd think that it'd be 60, given it would be either 60 or 70, depending on the numbers on what the average is, but it's actually 50 and 60. So you're way above the poverty line. And in America, definitely, just because the world's, if you look at the world's like minimum of income in a household, but then you start like, I think genuinely some major corporations base off their what their jobs are off of that, what's the minimum that you can, that a single person makes, and that's how you become competitive, right? And I think that's what some corporations use to make their case on like, we have a competitive pay, because if they're paying you as a full-time worker, whatever job you're doing, if you're making the average in the United States, which is about $30 to $36,000 a year, and if it was 30, right, and they're offering you 31, it's competitive, right? If it's 36, they're offering you 37, it's competitive, right? If it's 36 and they're offering you 36,500, it's competitive. That's how they kind of word it. In situations like this, it's really dope. To me, I think that's 100% and awesome that Destiny's able to do this. I think that just like I think he knows, even with his statement where let's see here, it's right here. In some ways, it's probably a mistake to do that, but it's fine, I guess. Like the way I view it, right? If your stuff grows, they should grow with you. And 100%, but I think that there should be a set thing of what you can compensate a person without losing 100% of what you own and value. And some people don't need that, right? Some people don't need 100% of what they make, so that's great. I personally just want to be able to make enough to be able to pay somebody adequately for what editing is. And I would sit there and look at what the competitive rate is. If there's no if the competitive rate isn't something that sits well with me, then I want to set a minimum, right? Like whatever that is at the time, because I can't guarantee. I can sit here and say, man, I want to pay an editor $100,000 a year to do everything for me, right? Great, that's great. But like, if I'm not making $100,000 a year, can't really do that for that person, even if I really wanted to. So making out like, not outrageous, but making statements like that and never really achieving that, then you're setting a bar really high. And especially if you got people that are really interested in editing, and they're not going to edit for you until you're making $100,000 a year. But if you're making $100,000 a year on the dot, that doesn't mean your whole paycheck's going to your editor. So you have to think about it like future escape. And I don't think people do that as well, or think through that a lot of things of what they're doing. For us here, for example, with what we're doing with the podcast and what we're doing with the community, like I have just goals set in mind. The first goal for me is to be able to be sustainable for myself. So that means like if I can replace my income, awesome. Once I'm able to replace my income, then the goal is to replace my wife's income so she can come home and be full-time at the house. Third process will be a little bit more of a longer wait, and we're gonna have to be budgeting throughout the time, because we're gonna still try to hire and utilize services from people throughout the time being. Recently I signed a contract to be a part of we're working together, partnership with Walter Media, run by Deadly Dill Gaming, and we're using resources to be able to get him to come in and help us out with a few things in our content creation, which is great. And it's something that I wanted to invest in. That's the whole process, is that like I can't wait until I'm home and my wife's home. And maybe you can, right? If you have the time and the skill set to be able to do that, if you're not in my shoes, you're able to do that right now. So you can do that, wait until an X number appears to be able to say, hey, now I can derive the rest of this money and funnel it towards this direction that I would love to use. But not everybody's in that situation. So then, well, like I was saying, my third goal is to be able to then amass enough income to be able to do two things. One, be able to employ people from the community, people around me. And so that goes to like, one, bringing on Deadly Dill, right? Like if keeping the Walter Media going. And then on top of that, use like anything else. Do we have graphics designers that we can use? And just being able to employ people slowly. That some positions might not be full-time because we're not looking for that as a full-time gig. It's more so like, hey, I have somebody that I know that if I need X thing, I can reach out to. And then the third thing is to be able to give back to the community, to be able to bless others, right? That would be the biggest thing. Now, through all this time, we're still doing the third option that I'm hoping for. It's not happening as often, and it's not happening to the level that I probably would like it to all the time. So that's where it's like, man, once I get to this point, this just allows me to do this all the time with no boundaries, versus now like I could still do it at the level that I want to do it with some boundaries until I get to that goal. And so that's kind of like the vision of what we plan to do with Cha-Ching and the Treasured Podcast, right? Getting to that point. And so we build that from the get-go. I'm not saying that Destiny didn't, but I'm sitting here like there's different options, right? So if I was in his shoes and I was making the money that he was making, that's how everything would basically get separated, and probably get separated even more after we start realizing like, hey, so we're hitting these goals and we're allocating finances in this direction, that direction, and this direction. Like where else can we start doing other things with our finances? Even with the finances that you do get up front, like how well are you managing them? You are getting into content creation, you have to decide one of two things, right? I've said it before. You either treat it like a hobby or you treat it like a business. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no lukewarm. Like, you'll kind of do it as both. The reason being is it helps set realistic expectations for what you're trying to achieve. If it's more like a hobby, then you're not necessarily going to be dying over the fact, and you shouldn't be, but like dying over the fact of like, hey, are my videos, are my streams, are my posts, are all this stuff doing great? Because all that stuff matters, impressions and all that other jazz, to be able to start funneling in people into your socials. For like, let's say you're doing something like long form video content on YouTube, trying to get people to funnel in to your Kick streams, to your Twitch streams, to going to your Instagram, your Twitters, your Facebook pages, whatever it is, to start creating those impressions, to start creating more of a community, to start figuring out how to work it to be able to create revenue and passive revenue through content creation. So if you're doing it as a hobby, you don't really care, right? If you do a video and it does one, doesn't matter. You posted a video because it's just a hobby and you wanted to do that. You had fun making that video, and you can have fun. I'm not saying on the other route, not that you can't have fun on the other route. You should, and you can, but there's no like expectation that you have over yourself. If you're doing it as a business, then it sets more goals and like a clear mindset of what you're supposed to do, what you want to do. And every time you click that live button, it has more meaning other than I'm just gonna BS and goof around, have a good time, which is great. Like, those things are great. I'm not trashing on people for that stuff. I'm just sitting here like having that, like, if you're trying to replace your income with content creation and you have that type of mentality every time you go live, then not that you can't, but you'll probably, your goal is super far out, right? Before that happens, it's going to be super far out, because something has to change in the mindset of an individual to be able to support the goal that you are looking to achieve. And that's the biggest thing that people don't realize when it comes to things of this matter. All in all, I think it's an amazing thing that Destiny is being able to do this with his revenue. I would probably argue in the fact, just like how he said in his statement, right, that it might not be the wisest thing. You can argue it in that direction. You truthfully can. And I would almost agree. Well, I wouldn't say agree. I would say I would agree. I would say it's that wise. I'm not telling him how to use his money, but in my opinion, I don't think it's that wise, because it's like majority share of your company, right? If that's what he is, right? That's his brand, Destiny. He is the brand. He is the product. 45% of his brand, his product is already owned by somebody else. And so then when you try to give shares to like if you had 50 other employees, how much shares are you going? 45% of shares are going in just one direction. So when you're trying to branch off and say, hey, I got to give some of these shares to somebody else. Well, that man's getting $30,000 plus a month. You think he's going to be okay with you? Like, hey, I'm going to cut your income to like $10,000 a month because I want to be able to give X amount to other people. Or even for Destiny, let's say if he doesn't go that route and gives more of his shares away, gives more of his stake away, that's less revenue for him. And if you're living up to a certain, which most people do, that's why you want to be financially literate when it comes to these things, because most people, if you make 50, you spend $50,000 a year, which you don't want to be at that aspect at all. You don't want to be spending what you're making a year. You want to be living underneath that and using the extra to go in different revenue streams. Now, I'm not no financial expert, so I'm not going to tell you percentages. There's plenty of financial experts out there that are credible that you can go and ask. Like if you're making $50,000 a year as a single or as a couple, like what should you really be spending and what should you living up to and what the other should be going to, right? It's not wise to live like if you're making 50, spending 50. If you're making $1 million, spending $1 million. You want to be able to live a certain type of modesty with your finances, so you're not in the rut later on and you're struggling and in debt and figuring out like what went wrong with my life. Like probably the financial route is what went wrong with your life there. At the end of the day, I think it's a great thing for Destiny.